So, 45 interviews with 45 speakers in 45 days.
It's
Darren
an epic
Deojee.
feat.
Darren in the house. So, Darren, my first question to you today is, how's it going for you?
Am I muted? No, I'm all right. How's it going for me? It's going well. I mean, really testing times on every level.
Yeah.
But I find that there's nobody that I've spoken to that that's not true for, really. Deep stretches and tests in every direction, past, present, future, near and far. So I am being stretched, I am being tested, I am being challenged, I'm being poked, but I'm all right.
Yeah. Challenges is the word.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
very much so. Many
Absolutely.
man challenges, adult challenges,
Yeah,
adult spirit challenges.
yeah, yeah. So, Darren, I know you're fresh out of the Betterway conference.
Yeah.
Just give me a little bit of a summary on what you were doing there, what you're talking about, who you met, what the vibe was like.
Amazing. I've spoken at all three of the Betterway conferences, two in Bath, one in Vienna. Great honor to be invited to speak to such esteemed professionals, really. What I love about that group, though, is that you've got a real mix of real professional doctors as well as experienced activists. The vibe is amazing. You've got, I mean, when COVID landed and I started to work with some of these doctors, I was genuinely hopeful for the first time. I mean, it's been tempered since then, but the reason being, as you know, and others know, some of us have been in this sort of a stand against global corruption and tyranny for decades now, and a lot of these doctors are quite new to it. There's a bit of fervor and some naivety in my measure, you know. But what I love is their diligence. I've been working in the sort of spiritual and anarchic activist community for decades, and you know, there's passion, but there's a lack of diligence and professionalism. And I've been part of that as well. And to be around these people who are used to being diligent, they're used to being professional, they're used to making sure that their details are right before they move, and coupled with a spiritual awakening for many of them, fantastic energy in that respect. Great concern still about shadow psychology lying in blind spots, group dynamics causing shadow to rise. That's all still going on. But in general, the vibe is great. The other thing I'm really enjoying, having been through the progression with Betterway, is that some of these doctors, due to their diligence and their specialisms, is that they've had a few years now to piece together data on things that they've become aware of in global corruption. So we've got some of the talks this time were so specialized. And we were looking at, so like in the first Betterway, it was all about COVID, all about the vaccine. The second one was still mainly about that, but this one wasn't. This one was mainly about all sorts of alt health issues and all sorts of details that these guys have now got real research on, and some of them being worked on by 100 doctors from around the world. But amazing talks on 100% capacity to prevent dementia. Great insights there. Amazing research on electrosmog and Wi-Fi and the relay and actual proven impact on cellular structure, neuropsychology in terms of anxiety being possibly produced by Wi-Fi fields. So these kind of specialisms I find really rich, overloading as well, because you've got, you know, 30 speakers a day at Betterway. It's a lot to take in. I was there to kind of be to bring a different perspective. So this time I was bringing the native angle again, like some of you know. So my thing is all these things that we call alternative, I've discovered are actually part of our return to more natural and native ways of being. And so alternative medicine, this is what really got me in with the doctors, was saying to them, like, your alternative medicine is really native medicine. And this time it was proven really, because so many of these doctors were talking about whole foods, getting in nature, walking barefoot in nature, but they've got the science now that says, here's why you should do it for your health and well-being. Now, the crazy thing is, of course, that that's what native humans do anyway, whereas now we've got the science to say, here's why you should do it, even if you don't feel like a native and you don't want to walk around with your bare feet. There's a medical health and well-being reason why it's worth you doing this. So I was in doing the native solution as a point of saying that it wasn't an invitation to join something. So the reason this has come about is I noticed in the movement 15 years ago that in this country, the big problem was when the movement gets to a certain size, shadow psychology between movement leaders emerges. The movement itself is ready to go, but you've got these leaders that had invested in a method, invested in an approach and a perspective. They've got momentum, they've got connections and followers, they've got strength. And then they come together with other movements and movement leaders, and you get these committees and meetings happening, strategic meetings, which is great. But as soon as you get to this stage of something looking to become bigger, either with a more unifying umbrella or to have groups merging, shadow psychology comes out. And it's about fear of loss of progress, fear of loss of momentum, fear of loss of identity, fear of this other larger method potentially failing when somebody is really attached to the method that they've got. And I saw that bubble up 15 years ago. I saw it bubble up with these doctors 3 years ago, and there was a major kickoff in the New World Council for Health around this cropping up and almost crashing the whole ship, which I was very sad about and sad to see. But what I was painting the picture of is that the native position and the native angle isn't an invitation to join anything. It isn't an invitation to use somebody else's method or to stop what you're doing at all. It is simply an umbrella that gives everybody a single voice. You can have off-gridders and professors of emeritus and blooming, anarchic legal activists and crypto capitalists all under a native banner, which is a much stronger voice, because at the minute they're all individuated like vertical niches. So what I've been suggesting with the native banner is twofold. One is it's a solution that doesn't ask you to give anything up. All it does is seek to champion your right to carry on doing what you're doing in terms of having the freedom to experiment on new and better ways forward. But the other point of the native position is, first of all, that strength in numbers, but also it's about a shift from wrestling and arguing over legal modalities to try and get human rights. And instead, it's about saying, do you know what? Forget that. I've seen it across the world, small and large. Human rights is not recognized by the globalists. It just isn't. And then the native notion is about sidestepping from under Indigenous rights, under human rights to under Indigenous rights. And this is an enormous, let me get rid of this, excuse me. Don't know who that is. This is an enormous maneuver because Indigenous rights have been hard fought for and hard won, and they are completely championed and upheld by the woke. And this is a way to try and leverage the woke agenda, because as I was saying to these doctors, it doesn't matter how beautiful their conference is, and it's beautiful. It doesn't matter how much like the BBC it looks, or even how much like Blooming Bilderberg it looks. It's irrelevant. You can make the glossiest, shiniest, more professional looking thing ever. Without virality, reach, influence, you're just going to disappear. And I've seen it happen in the past to amazing professional things that were put out. Sacha Stone did an amazing International Court of Justice thing with actual judges, actual things like this. He did it like 10, 15 years ago. It was beautiful. It was high end. It was all glossy brochures and professionals. And, where is it? Where is it? Must have cost them a fortune. They had their findings. They tried people. Where are the arrests? And so many people going on about, all we need is the crown jury or whatever it's called, and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, you can do that. You can hold it. But without virality, reach, and influence, you're just mates patting each other on the back. So the point of the native angle is really, because this is the huge thing. And just to backtrack a little, where this came from is for years, I was puzzling, as I do on spells and words. Why do white and Western educated people refer to Indigenous people and native people without referring to themselves? Because if you're not native or Indigenous, then what are you? And I mean it. Because if something is non-native and non-Indigenous, then it is alien. It is invasive. It is not at home. And I feel like that is almost in Western culture a little bit, a sense of not being at home in the world, not being at home in the body, not being at home with other humans. And what I found in this process is that actually what we are dealing with in the so-called alternative and awakening scene is something phenomenal, spiritual, magical, profound, and powerful. And it is, to me, and what I've witnessed, it is a natural healing. And what we are seeing, to me, is a natural decolonization of the white European bloodlines. And what I mean by that is Celts, Picts, the French natives, the German natives, you know, the Spanish natives. And as a great friend of mine once answered, the reason Westerners don't think of Indigenous people referring to themselves is because obviously we were colonized first. And the Spanish Inquisition did an amazing job of burning the bridges to the story keepers, the song keepers, the method keepers of our native past. But really and truly, it's not gone. And when we talk about ancestors awakening, we talk about the ancestral connection that natives feel as a real and palpable thing. That is what I feel is coming online, is that the Western, and even any colonized nation, in any nation where the males are collared and cuffed and tied, is what we're dealing with here. All of those nations are seeing these natural awakenings of individuals. And to me, it is those ancestral lines healing and integrating what we call the colony. And this is what I was given to the talk to the doctors about, because it's really interesting language, because decolonization is a shocking language to first dump on white people. And because it's like, well, what do you mean? And it's like, you know, this is about nativity. You know, nativity isn't about a guy being born in a shed. You know, if serenity is about being serene and integrity is about being integral, then nativity is about being native. You know, it's like, this is how the language works, people. You know, it's got nothing to do with sheds. You know, and really what I'm seeing is a rising nativity of the European Westerner, and that is something that we need, because if those natives can come into an alliance with the other natives, then we have really something powerful. And the virality of the question of white natives, the question of how could it be any other way, and then the question of how to ascribe and where to ascribe Indigenous rights for white people in their homelands. And I don't just mean white people, I mean in any colonized nation. So what I was speaking to these doctors about was the fact that, well, let's look at the language of a colony, because it's quite interesting, because we usually use it in relation to the gut, you know, which is where all hungers come from. All hungers tend, and our emptiness comes from the gut as well. And it's and if we look at, say, we normally use the term colony in a petri dish, you know, so it's like bacteria. So as I was saying to them, let's talk about bacteria in a dish. You know, there's a colony, and there's another word we have for that, which is culture. It's a culture. Okay, so what I was saying to these people is, what defines a people or a culture? What defines them is values, direction, goals and aspirations, shared perspective, and on all the things that come under shared values, the shared values of what we want to see in our environment, the shared values of what we think a human should do to be a good human and to feel like they are part of a good human community. And I was saying to these doctors, like, you're all wrestling in this fight against something, believing that you're fighting to get something back that was yours. But I said, let's look at your value set, and let's look at that value set. Are these people, your culture, your colony, in terms of values, direction, orientation, outlook, general direction? Are they? And I'm not seeking to create an us and them here. I'm seeking to get to these people. Look, when you get caught up in the fight, when you're first stirred up, it's so easy to feel like you're in the biggest bonfire going, and you get so caught up in being against something that you forget what you are for, and then you end up never doing what you are for because you get so caught up in against. So that was really what I was there doing, and I was presenting a solution called the Bill of Peace, which is the first ever class action suit that was created to stop the oppression of one group by another. So I was presenting the solution as a better way to say, all the goals you're seeking for, you don't have to wait for the big win until it's all over. That's my suggestion, that we can maintain the fight, but right now we have nowhere to stand. There's nowhere to invite people into. There's nowhere to go for respite. So I'm suggesting using a bill of peace to stop oppression of one group by another for an alliance of natives across places to make a mass move. Because again, in terms of virality, the bill of peace is beautiful virality. The bill of peace to champion the right of the European natives is beautiful virality, even if it's just throwing the questions out first of all. Very difficult to squash that. And I've tested this around the world. I've tested it in Vienna, Mexico, with North Americans, Canadians, doctors, lawyers, lay, activists, anarchists. Everybody gets it. So the message I've just been seeding in the last couple of years is, look, this isn't about you joining anything. This is about suggesting a way for us to leave. And so if you see the native banner moving, if you see the Bill of Peace moving, be aware that it's looking to champion your right to do something. And if so, please do get on board without fear that this could be seeking to swallow you up into something else. And that was really where I left it, because so much energy or effort would be required for this. I was testing the litmus test of how people reacted and got beautiful, beautiful, heartfelt, resonant responses. So I'm aware that I've used up most of the interview time in giving you the overview there, but that's what I was doing.
That's fantastic, Darren. So, so what sort of traction, or you're talking about virality. How this Bill of Peace sounds great. I mean, just the name just says it all, doesn't it? It's a really beautiful thing. Where can you take that, and how do you feel that can be moved forward? It's interesting. At the beginning of the COVID, I found out about a woman who was deconstructing the American Constitution and going to put it back for the UK. She was going to her own version, and going to pass it out, and it never happened.
Yeah.
Do you see it as that sort of we the people document where there's a kind of a spiritual contract?
Yes.
So
yes. Well, because from the native position, spirit is integrated with matter. There's no separation. So there's like markers that we have that would be in this document in terms of outlining what the definition of a native is, and so that people can choose whether they identify with that or as that, even though it may be a new notion for them. So, for example, what we like to say is, natives around the world are in all forms are moved by unseen forces within and around them that they value and that they respect and that they allow to inform them. Whereas what we have on the colony side is until the unseen force shows up on an oscilloscope, it doesn't exist. Yeah. Not real. So it doesn't exist. Yeah. Another thing is that the native is deeply aware of the interconnectedness of all life and seeks to maintain that in their environment. Whereas the colonist and the colony is disconnected from nature, talks about visiting it, whereas the native feels like and knows they are nature. But the disconnected colonist feels that because they're disconnected from nature, they're not interconnected, and therein lies the justification for dominance and doing whatever you like to it. And there's an interesting piece of language here. We'll go back to the Bill of Peace in a second, but just to further understand the colony, the Toltecs would refer to it as actually a parasitic colony. And if we look at what a parasite does, is it tricks a host into believing that it is the host, like mistletoe. So a tree feeds mistletoe because it believes it is a branch, otherwise it wouldn't feed it. And then what a parasite does is it keeps the host in a low state of well-being, while the parasite's hungers are met at the expense of the host. And if we look at the urban zones, which are mainly the hub of the colony, when we're talking about colonization, the place where it exists the most is in city zones. And if we look at how people are there live, most of them are feeding hungers that don't keep them in a state of well-being. And most of them, and I do mean most, end up addicted, medicated, hating themselves, wanting to kill themselves, overweight, unfit. And it's like, to me, the big change in the native position is, wait a minute, all this time I've been cap in hand, trying to justify, explain, and defend my position to these statists who are looking down their nose at me as if they've got some higher truth. And I'm like, wait a minute, mate. Why am I explaining or justifying myself to you when you're scornfully championing a way of life where everybody hates themselves? The number one cause of death for men is they kill themselves. They're all addicted. Half of them have got cancer. Why am I defending myself to you? You're a lunatic thinking that that's the way for humans to live. And I don't need to explain the unseen forces that are real to me, because you're like a kid who's never left home. You're in Granny's cave, wrapped in all the ancestral gifts, going, there's no wind, you stupid natives. Whereas the people who are outside in the real world have got the wind blowing in their hair, and they're like, wow, look at all these unseen forces moving us. And, you know, and you've got these scorning academics sitting in their little offices, which is really Granny's cave, going, we know better. And it's like, honestly, my days of justifying, defending, and explaining myself to those people are over.
Yeah.
You know, all I am interested in doing is finding somewhere to stand in, live in, and fight from for me and my people, whoever they may be. Because without somewhere to stand, this is what I was saying to these doctors. If you've not got somewhere to stand, somewhere to go back to, then you have no option. You are wrestling to death for supremacy of the arena, because you have no other options. There's no other option. You need the big win or death. And you and I know, Eli, for people that have been looking over the last couple of decades, I've seen people rise to stardom, try and bring change, and die, you know. And we've got these doctors who are full of the spiritual fervor that we've all felt of the first few years of awakening. My indomitable spirit can defeat Monsanto. My indomitable spirit can destroy the WHO. And it's like, oh, bless you, and keep you. I know spirit thinks that, but you haven't actually been in the arena to find out what actually happens.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, that's what I'm about. Find somewhere to stand in, stand from. Without that, none of us have got any rest. You go from the pressure of the front line to different pressures in your bedroom, in your living room, because we've got no proven, reusable way to say, do you know what? Your fucking authority ends here.
Yeah. So did you get feedback? Did you do a question and answer with the doctors? I mean,
yeah, I was on a panel afterwards, you know, but the panel didn't end up discussing that. And I was very radical compared to some of the others. I mean, really, my position is deeply radical in terms of, for people that have never come across these notions before, if they're used to being, you know, some of them, I was Professor Emeritus for 40 years and I was Pariah 3 years ago. For these guys there, do you know what? You might well be a native that's going through a natural healing process. You're like, I just want to correct the journal. I just want to correct the journal. Bless them and love them. But, you know, give them 5 years, give them 10 years, let them correct the journal and see how there's still work to be done, you know? And it's like, I just feel, because I'm aware of how many years I've not spent with my children in their most precious times. I'm aware of the skills that I didn't gain in the decades that I've had because I was caught up in the fervor of the fight and the Messiah complex and the ego and the sort of, yeah, we can win, people power, all the rest of it, being like, but you've got nowhere to go. Nowhere safe. And if you haven't championed somewhere safe, then what are you trying to save others for? You can't even save yourself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm doing a talk in a couple of weeks, and I didn't even know I was doing the talk, but somebody sent me the flyer and said, you're on this bill. I was like, what? And I rang the woman up and I said, you know, what am I going to talk about? You know, what do you want to talk about? And I do this talk called Disconnecting from the Matrix. And I looked through it and I thought, you know what? There is no way that I'm going to be able to give this to this set of people. And I've had to temper it a lot. And actually, in the radical field, and I think, you know, it's an amazing platform that you've been given at the Betterway, Darren, because we do need the whole spectrum. Yes. We need our whole spectrum, and we need people to push that Overton window.
Totally.
You know, the acceptance of that. It's like, well, actually, Darren's taking me there. You know, outside of the screen. You know, he's taking me there, and we do need to do that because they're going to come back in. They're going to go back to their office, and they're going to come back in, and they might just think when they're sat there doing their paper, well, actually, Darren was on this. So, you know, we need that radical voice, and you know, I mean, it must be a challenge to go in there and try and communicate some of these more. I mean, they're spiritual ideas, but they're working in a different field, in a different form, in a different space.
They're embodied. It's how they embody. It's how the spiritual ideas embody. And what's amazing is that this pathway feels like it is the natural one for spirit because there is zero pretentiousness in the native position. There's zero ego. There's zero superiority. All there is a quiet stand. You know?
It's really interesting.
Very different, very different, very different. And that's where people were moved. They're the ones who were moved. It's like, you know, the ones who are caught up in the fire of the fight didn't come and speak to me. The ones who were tired of the fight came and they were like, that so touched my heart. And not only that, the ease they feel as their own nativeness lands. And I've had people come to me, middle-aged people, especially a lot of South Africans. There was loads of South Africans there. The number of South African white people that were coming going, thank you so much. You've answered what I always knew, because they're quite connected with the native cultures in Africa still. And they felt their own nativeness, but didn't have somewhere to put it. And the number of them that have said to me that once this lands, it's like, it smashes white guilt and shame, smashes it. And I think a lot of powerful white individuals are cowed, especially the men, because they're big bad white man, as a big bad white person, and they're big bad white man as well. So you better sit down and shut up because you've had your time, pal. Whereas
we can be benevolent, you know.
Totally.
You know, that's my stance.
Not only that, the point for me is that the European tribal individual is the most powerful individual that the human race has produced. And it's because most of the others have kind of more collectivist tribal origins, but to do with human evolution and migration, the ones that moved to the hardy north and the hardships that they had to put up with, and what was required to cause those tribes to survive in those places and times, produced the most powerful set of individuated ones that we've seen. And that is why they are the culture that is the most under attack, because the one thing the globalists do not want moving are white individualist natives. You know, absolutely not, because once they move off, it's game over. But if you can convince them that they're shameful, that it's their fault that things are bad, even worse if you're a bloke, convince them not to move, and the evidence on the table is that's what we've got. You know, you got 80% of attendance at any of these things are women. You know, you've got men. You know, the number one cause of death is suicide. It's like their agenda has worked. And that's really what I'm trying to reverse with this. And I've got so many people saying to me, oh, you're going to get called a white supremacist. Why are you making it about that? So, well, first of all, I can't be a white supremacist because I'm mixed race and brown and was subject to racism by both white and brown people most of my life. You know, so fuck both of you. Neither accepted me at first when I was a kid, you know. And then the second point of it is, you forget that narrative. This is about healing and empowerment, you know, and it's about removing the crime of holding people accountable for the deeds of those long dead and distant. And I've been fighting that battle for years for men and made good headway, made good progress. And now I feel the call to champion it for not just white Europeans, but them especially because of virality, but also any colonized culture, that the people are coming around to the more native ways to champion the rightness, the goodness, the spiritness, the naturalness of this process. And the one thing that I didn't get a chance to say at the talk at the event, but I wanted to make the point, I'm going to make it here now, because it's an explanation as to why people are experiencing rejection, vitriol, and attack by those that used to be friends or colleagues or whatever. And I'm going to use the language of the colony again. So it's like, if you've got an ant colony, 10 million ants in a colony, and they become aware of an ant that isn't one of them in it, same in beehives, they become aware of a bee that isn't one of them, what do? They turn on it, they pick it up, they take it to the edge of the colony, and they chuck it away. And the number of doctors I heard over the weekend say, you know, I was professor for 40 years, I was the top doctor in the hospital for 20 years, and then almost overnight, all of that was gone, and no more pay, no more job, sacked. And it's like, your colony rejected you because they identified you were not one of them. So they were going to stop. They're pulling nutrition, pulling nutrient, you're not getting paid, pulling status, you're not getting a job, all the rest of it. You've been ejected. But what I'm seeing happening with the doctors is a bit like, no, you misunderstand. You're all one of me. And I'm like, and what I was saying to them was, I appreciate where you're coming from in terms of believing that everyone has been duped, and all you've got to do is present them with the information and they'll come around. But I said, there's something, first of all, you sound like the other side when you talk about re-educating everyone. You know, but you've got to be careful there. Road to hell, and all that. Absolutely. And then the second point that I made to them was, first of all, this isn't about the data. People have had the data. It's about values in interpreting data, and it's about risk So what you find is the natives, the natural humans, don't mind the risks of natural selection, but they're terrified of the risks of technological selection through shots. Whereas the techno-humans are the other camp, they're terrified of natural selection, but they're quite happy to subject themselves to the technical selection of the shot. And what I've been saying to these doctors is, I know you believe everybody would come round to your way of thinking, but we all think that. And what you're actually doing is you're denying these people their agency. You're denying them their right to choose, their authority and their preference and their choice. You're presuming that every one of them has simply chosen that because they were duped. Some of them, I agree, that is true for them. But I don't believe it's the 99% everyone keeps talking about. I really don't. You know, there's too much money, too much interest, too much power supporting the techno-human agenda. And the people that I know who are into it are good people. They're good spirits. I love them. They've got good thoughts. And it's like, well, why am I going to deny them their chosen path of reality? I'm up for live and let live, not you must live my way. And my concern is that both camps, techno-human and this sort of alt scene, are both kind of saying, you got to live my way. And it's like, I'm really wary about that.
It's almost like you're keeping them prisoner in your energy field.
Exactly. And with your presumptions. And instead, in a way,
Yeah.
you're being kept in their energy field. And for
Yeah.
me, that's then interfering with nature's potential offer of a divergence or a fork.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it means like, well, we're not giving nature clear messages of what we are for and who we are with. If we're giving nature messages of, you know, this is what we're against, but it's dominating all my time, all my energy, and my life. Nature looks at it and goes, oh, so you're with them then.
Yeah.
You're with them. So you're not with this lot that are returning to the land and doing all that because you're just in the fight zone. Oh, you must be one of them. And then whatever nature is deciding to do with that lot, you know, that's going to happen to those people. And you know, I'm a divergent theorist. Yeah.
Well, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because if you're in that academic world and you're quite left brain, say, let's just say that, and you're used to plowing through logical things and very data based, your programming is huge for a start. So what do? You naturally just go, I'm the opposite of them, or I'm not saying what they're saying.
Yes.
And what you're saying is actually we need to open up that discussion. You know, one side is very resistant, but the other side needs to actually bring on board.
Yes.
Just bring on
Yes.
board. And
Yeah, that's it. And not even bring on board, just offer.
Yeah.
Offer.
Yeah.
But my point to them is, and I understand why they're doing it, because with the current arena the way it is, they've got to go for the whole win. They've got to go to get as many as possible because they haven't secured a home base.
Yeah.
So you have to win. You've got to defeat the foe. And then it's like, but don't you realize the guy who you're wrestling, the guy who's backing him owns the ring and the arena. So even if you beat him, it's not like you're going to get ownership of the ring or the arena. He's just going to put somebody else in the ring with you. Yeah. And if you're new to this, then you're not going to know that.
So yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is a machine we're up against. There's no doubt. And layers and layers and layers.
Humans up. Grinds humans up. History is littered with the lives of beautiful martyrs who felt they were close to the finish line.
Well, the classic one is Braveheart. You know, it's so funny. Whenever people quote that film, I say, you know, he's crying out freedom at the end, and he's just about to get killed. Well, who's the winner in that story? You know, okay, we know the spirit is eternal, and that's what that scene's saying, but he's still dead, right?
Exactly. Man, I can't believe how many. I get triggered, man. I get triggered by all these people that go on about how we are the majority, we've already won, the spiritual war's almost over. It's like, have you looked at the amount of unbelievable torture and abomination that humans are enacting upon each other? And you're sitting there going on about how we're winning when it's got markedly worse since you were a child. I mean, I don't want to say Cloud Cuckoo Land, but what I do want to say is and I said it to these doctors the weekend, I said, we are the 99% of the people in this hotel. You know, we are the majority of the people in this room. Yes, but you're naive and ignorant if you think we are the majority of the populace of the nation or the planet, because There's no evidence that backs that up, apart from you starting to find more like-minded people.
Yeah, I get that. It's like depending on the room, right? You're 99% of the majority, depending on the room, whichever room you're in.
You get yourself into a TEDx talk or something like that, or get yourself into the next conference with the NHS. Are you the 99% there? No, you're the 0.1%, you know.
That's it. Yeah, and if you show your face, you're out.
Exactly. Again, the colony goes, oh, there's another one that's not one of us.
Yeah.
Vitriol, rebuke, vitriol, rebuke.
Yeah, no, I get it. So Darren, you're very, I know you're solutions based, and where are you seeing? How can we get traction on this? And the Bill of Peace, how do you see that looking?
Yeah, so I mean, there's groundwork to be done here, because the groundwork, the social virality has to be built up before the bill moves. So really what I'm doing at the minute is the platform that I was building for the doctors a year ago, I'm morphing to make it for native groups or alternative groups that are willing to come on this platform and share their story. And really what I'm looking to build is stories of European nativeness. And have them next to the stories that I've got from other recognized natives, like the Mexican natives in Chiran, the Sami in Siberia. You know, when we put the stories of Rob from Kent and Jill from Essex, of their journey of healing and integration and coming back to more native ways, and even their surprise and shock at realizing that it was nativeness they were coming into, which is what the case is. What I'm saying to people is, this story, this is it for people to see the process, to see that you were once in there, and that these things first started looking like you were just some kind of a little bit different with an alternative lifestyle, but then you find out your whole value system is different, your whole motivation and drive is different, and then look at the beautiful life and connections and abundance that you're discovering on this journey, because that is true for everybody that I've seen that's gone on this journey, is that they move into greater ease, love, connection, and abundance. And it's like, let's have a bank of these stories and a bank of these groups, because that's what's needed, the alliance of natives. Once the alliance is in place, the bill can be crafted to move. And I mean, the way the bill is planned to work is, we're not talking about going and saying just leave it alone. We're talking reparation. The reparation is, I'm not buying land to live on by your rules again. No, you're going to give us back some of what you stole by deceit, violence, abuse, rape, and torture. You're going to give it back, and you're going to be lucky that we're not asking for it all. And the great thing is that the reparation movement has already started to move. The groundwork has been put in by the other natives. So already we've seen the Americans and the Brits returning artifacts. The conversation, and that is reparation. In America, the conversation, there's two reparation conversations going on. One about, should we actually be giving the land back to the Americans, the Native Indian Americans? And the debate there is like, oh, but which tribe should we give it to? Because the Comanche had it first, then the Apache defeated them. Should we give it to Apache or Comanche? Right? That's detail. The point is, the conversation is happening. And the other conversation that's going on is financial recompense to the African American. And that's an active conversation. They're even coming up with a number. The last I heard, the number was 1.2 million for every Black American. Now, I'm not saying that that would be something that needed to be brought about over here, but there's lots of interesting things that can be done in terms of security, because that's the concern, isn't it? It's security. How am I going to support my family and things that still might need to trade with the colony? Of course you will. We all will. However, if we, and again, this can come later, this is about native groups strategizing together, but just as an idea, just as a seed suggestion, we could say, all right, all you corporations that have been using the land resources of the native peoples without giving them anything for it for centuries, somebody's here now to say, actually, no more can you take our water and then add some crap to it and sell it on for huge profits. There'll be, I'm suggesting a native tax on profits on anyone like power companies, water companies, all the companies that are profiting from the resources of the natives, which actually includes other humans, that can theoretically be taxed or levied. And even if, it almost doesn't matter what the outcome is, the conversation matters. The conversation of the unjustness of their ongoing enrichment without giving anything to the natives. I mean, that is unjustifiable, unsubstantiable, and wrong by every metric. I just want to see what happens when awakened white natives want to make that stand. All I want to do is start that fire. I can't do it, you know, but I've got some tinder, and I've got a tinder and a spark that can bring all these disparate groups together if they're willing to do so. By seeing that, I'm not asking them to give up or join something that loses their identity or ask them to behave in a certain way. It literally asks nothing of you other than your willing affiliation when the Bill of Peace moves, because that's what's needed, is the weight of numbers and the weight of angles. So we've got doctors tackling big pharma, big med. We've got crypto and alt currencies tackling economy and banking corruption. We've got the spiritual movement challenging the church. You know, each of the traditional heads of evil that are keeping humans constrained. Education is being challenged by home ed. You know, all these things are being tackled, but there are people that are lost in their own fire. They're lost in their own firefight. And what I'm trying to do here is say, look, you can keep all that going, but we can unify and bring together off-gridders, alt-medders, homeopaths, blooming genuine professional doctors and lawyers, all the activist scene, the sovereigns, the free man, the blooming cryptos, all of them under a native banner, with the Maori Health Council, the American Indian Council of Natives, the Hawaiian Natives, the African Natives, a council of natives. And it's a suggestion, because it's like, what I'm suggesting for why? Because I think it's what would work. It's not what I want. It's not my most romantic notion. I've got other more romantic notions than that. I've thrown 20 years at romantic notions, you know, costing me my life. And what I'm interested now is I want something that works. And I want it to work in the least possible time and benefit the maximum number of people to enable them to achieve the endpoints they seek without having to wait to defeat the beast. That's the position here. And it's like, the challenge I'm facing is that when people hear it, they kind of look at me as if I'm, or ask me questions as if I'm some kind of movement leader that wants to do this and get everybody under my banner. It's like, I don't.
No,
I just want to sow a language that weaves us together and see what comes from that, because that's co-creation. That's what I want to see. But if we don't have a shared language that says, you off-gridders, actually, even though I've been a professor of virology for 40 years, you off-gridders, you're with me. And actually, I've been learning to stand on the front line and fight the fire here, but I can't plant, and I don't have land that's free from electrosmog. But look at the off-gridders. They were like, fuck the front line fight. I'm not interested. I'm going to go and exit and build. So they've done that bit. And if they can come together, then the off-gridders have got someone who can fight because they've learned to cultivate, not fight. And then the ones that have learned to fight but not cultivate can benefit from those that have cultivated. But as long as they're speaking different languages and think they're fighting different fights, then we're divided and conquered no matter how big our movements are.
Yeah, it's a very, I mean, I use the word noble, but it is a very, it's righteous, it's correct. Let's say it's a correct thing, and it's for humanity. It's for humanity, and we've been abused for too long, right across the board. I was talking to somebody the other day who was saying, you know, this country, the true natives of this country, you know, in terms of longevity, they were crushed by Christians.
Exactly.
And that was 2,000 years ago.
Exactly.
So, you know, okay, well, that's not here anymore, but let's just say, you know, we have been conquered and we're still under occupation.
Yes, exactly that. I've got a great t-shirt I'm getting made. Romans go home with decolonizer on the back. Do you know what I mean? That's it.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, I mean that. Yeah, you know, there is a new consciousness. There is a new consciousness, and you know, it's great to have these conversations. Darren, we're out of time.
We are, mate. Well, I thank you so much for having me.
I know what it took you to get to me today, and I really appreciate you. I could just see you Sweeney-esque pulling into your drive, you know, and getting out and getting your laptop set up. You know, thank
still
you
being late.
yeah, no, you were fine. You were fine actually, but thank you so much for your service, and you know, come back and I'm going to carry on doing these events. You're obviously going to be at the Shine celebration.
I will.
You know, if you want to send over any of your events or anything, I'll promote them amongst the audience.
I'd love to. I'd love to. I mean, that's not my skill set, but I've finally got somebody, an organizer on board now, who's going to take care of that sort of stuff, so people can actually get some notice of something happening rather than being told the day before.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, that's fantastic. All right, Darren.
Thank you, Eli.
All good. Thank you so
Much
much.
love.
I'll speak
Take
to you
care.
soon.
All
Cheers.
the best.
Bye.